Okay, and that's us live, Laurence and Nicole. So thank you for joining us on this NEOchats today on the topic of sustainability in education, or education for sustainable development, or mainstreaming sustainability in education, or whatever you want to say. There's a number of ways to approach it. But I just wanted to start off by saying thanks for joining us. I know you're in Budapest, Nicole, and Laurence, you're over in Dubai. So just for being here and making it happen, first of all, thank you. I'm sure there's a lot that we're going to get from this today. It's nice to have you here. Can I start just by asking each of you just to give us just a little summary on the, because you both work in when you see the sort of the name or the title of where you work, it's not immediately, you don't immediately think, it's not like you're working at the Institute for Sustainability in Education, so just about where it is you work and how it relates to sustainability, or how your role relates to sustainability, even if it's just something you've shaped yourself. So Nicole, would you mind starting off with that?
Sure. And so, yeah, just maybe a little bit of how I got to where I got, because I think that's kind of critical to why I came out of. So I was in Mexico running a small nonprofit in a community, and when you're doing that, when you're working specifically in education in a community, you start to recognize that the environment's critical to everything you're doing, and you start to understand in community development as well that sustainability is part of everything. And so that nonprofit evolved into sort of education and sustainability, and from there, I started to work in more formal education. And in formal education, you start to discover that you have a similar but different challenge. And one is that you need to find a way to take sort of all this knowledge, in my case, around sustainability and community development to educators in a way that made it easy for them to use it in their classroom and include it in all of their subjects. And that was where my sort of interest in Compass education came in, because Compass education specifically provides tools and systems thinking tools for sustainability. And so it was just this easy way to look at how do we bring sustainability as a broad theme across subjects into the classroom. And that's what got me super excited and super involved. And it's sort of how I am here where I am, getting to work with fun people like Laurence, who are doing amazing work in the classroom.
So Laurence, I mean, you work together with Nicole. I mean, you're in Dubai. Can you tell us what the connection is and what you're doing over there?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you very much, Mark, for having me aboard as well, and Nicole for the invitation. So the connection, I guess, between Nicole and myself is through Compass Education. So I came from a different side, though. So I was inside the classroom. Historically, my job has been social studies and a physical education and health teacher. And over the years, I took an interest, I guess, in the environment in any shape. I had a lot of natural experiences as a child with my parents, and so kind of that natural caring for the world around me and the natural world in general. So I kind of brought that with me, but I was pretty much a streamline run-of-the-mill social studies teacher, at which point I got into the International School of Kuala Lumpur as a teacher, but I taught health and physical education and also ran a group called the Green Team, which is quite typical in many schools. And we had a new head of school who came in, named Paul Kamelik at the time, and he actually kind of pushed this Green Team to think a little bit further. And so the question was, what can we do? Like, what can we do that's different, that maybe can push the envelope a little bit? And so it was with his prodding, and of course this group of interested people in this Green Team, that we started coming up with the idea of, okay, we really need to kind of put environmental education, was the original thinking, and then kind of on a larger scale sustainability education on the table. And so back in 2010, we actually began the position, which was at the time a full-time position for environmental education coordinator. And then that morphed a little bit into sustainability education. And so since 2012, I've been doing this type of job. So a lot of my work now really has to do with supporting teachers, but in-house, in the school, with regards to what we call service learning, which is kind of a methodology of teaching to try to kind of generate this global citizenship piece. But through sustainability really as a context for which to work. And it was in that space that I started connecting with people in other schools in Southeast Asia who were also engaged in this work. And through various contacts, I ended up working with Compass Education. And then through Compass Education, here's my connection to Nicole, who's kind of the spearhead leader of the gang at the moment. So we work together side by side.
It's great to hear how it's almost like the process of sort of, empowerment and action or engagement into activism, that you've both come that path where you've started off, almost small, just doing stuff, taking small steps, and then actually stepping back and seeing the bigger picture and just getting broader and broader and cementing your path in this. I mean, you're both completely committed to this line of work, isn't it? I mean, it is the thing that you do now. It's almost like education contextualizes what you're doing in sustainability, isn't it? I wonder, in terms of sustainability, I know that those of us who work in it and have been working in it for a while, we sometimes might be guilty of sort of assuming that everyone has the same understanding of what it is. And of course, it can be scarily complex when you get beyond that kind of nice aesthetics of the SDGs I see behind you there, Laurence, and the little icons and the nice colors. And then you start to get into it, and you're like, oh my goodness, they all overlap. And, yeah. Could I ask each of you just, for the audience out there that are maybe taking their first steps in this sphere, how would you actually define sustainability when you're trying to sort of communicate it in a nutshell in a way that makes an impact and gives people a definition or a concept to sort of hold on to and build learning onto?
Nicole, you want to give it a shot?
I was going to give it to you, Laurence. You're the guy that does it all day long.
Yeah, don't all rush at once. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. But the truth is, it's interesting you asked that, because in Compass Education, we offer what we commonly call the level 1 course, which is kind of the intro phase, let's say, of sustainability. And one of the lessons is actually focused on exactly what you're talking about, that sustainability is broadly understood, but never entirely perfectly understood by anyone, because we each have our own version of what it might mean. I guess the kind of, what would it be, cookie cutter description would be that the ability to keep going, indefinitely without stopping, or being able to kind of somehow balance out the use of resources if you're looking at the biodiversity and kind of the biome side of things. But really, for me, it's about balance. It's about trying to find a space and an equilibrium. And Compass uses kind of 4 areas. Typically, if you hear sustainable development, you'll think about the environment and society and economy. And those are kind of those 3 Venn diagram looking designs. Compass has a 4th element, which for me really kind of gives it a lot of oomph. And what I really like about it is it's about well-being, and really it's about the individual. And so for me, it really nicely contextualizes the relationship between the self and the larger picture. And what it also does is it allows you to really embrace sustainability as something that's actually important and practical for you. So those kind of conversations are great, but really it's about finding that balance between all those dynamics that I just talked about, both in the self and within the larger context of the wider world, I guess. So that's a really long-winded way to say it. I apologize. Nicole, now you can really say the end.
And I think it's just so. No. I think you did a great job. It's one of the reasons, where I think we have to own the fact that there isn't a specific definition, and it doesn't have to be, right? We can be moving towards these ideas and concepts of sustainability without having it have to be some perfect goal. And I really think that as we begin to think broader about sustainability, which is something that I feel is a trend that has changed, right? We used to only think about the environment. Sustainability was the green team, it was nature, that was sustainability. And in part with the help of COVID, and in part with the help of people having more conversations, we're understanding that sustainability does affect everything and is about everything. And so I sort of really love this idea that a sustainable world is a better world and a world for everyone, and that our actions are towards that belief, right? And they need to fall across all spheres, not just the environment, right? And so the well-being aspect is critical, because if I'm not okay, I can't take care of everybody else. And so really employing it in the way that we think about sustainability. Sustainability is, it often feels right. And so if we own our role in it, we own where we're standing, then it's personalized in such a way that we can feel like we can take real action. And so not that there's an absolute definition, or certainly one that we all agree on, but there's many out there, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think I quite like that train of thought, in that it's you can zoom out and embrace the complexity of it, not be afraid of it. Because I mean, essentially we are talking about every aspect of life, human life on this planet, you know, from equity and access to education to, you know, life in the oceans, to where we, you know, how we use resources and how we think about linear and circular uses of products and consumption. And it is enormously complex, and that shouldn't be a threat, because to pick up on what you were saying there, Nicole, it's not like we have to solve all of those problems as individuals, you know, but it's zooming out, embracing the complexity of it, and then zooming back into yourself and thinking about, what can I do? And Laurence, you used the word practical as well, which I think is really important. But between that kind of knowing and doing, there is a gap, you know, and I've heard people call it the fear gap. I understand why climate anxiety is a thing. And I wonder how you both approach this, because, you know, people by now kind of have an idea of things they can do or things that are important, but yet there is that action gap. Why do you think it exists in your experience, and what kind of ways have you come across personally, even if it's just in the microcosm of the learning environment, without the big picture kind of systems thinking, just you and a group of learners, for example? How do you start helping people to feel a sense of agency amidst all of the anxiety? And Nicole, I think we've lost you.
Yeah, maybe. Right, I'll jump in and fill until she gets here.
Okay.
I think, again, I'm speaking as an educator now, so my understanding and role in the whole conversation is limited largely to non-technical know-how. And so I often feel that the gap that you speak of sometimes, especially at a school level, is largely based on the fact that, you know, children are young, and the people who are teaching them don't necessarily have that technical know-how to provide the tangible solutions that might be necessary. So our job often is to build the appropriate, what we call scaffolding, to scaffold the learning in such a way that really we're trying to focus on these, what sometimes are called 21st century skills, which is essentially these innovative or innovation ideas, the recognition that you have to fail often and try again, the whole prototyping concepts. So the way of learning is largely different from what it would have been when I was a child. And so, so the idea of kind of opening up the learning and providing opportunities for kids to look at things from obviously different perspectives, making the connections that you were just speaking of, because I think that's a hugely important aspect to recognizing that, yes, there is complexity here, and I shouldn't be scared of it. And the other thing, I guess, from my angle, and not that my job or an average school, let's say, is the same necessarily, where we consider ourselves a little bit of a front runner as far as your more traditional schooling system, but at the same time having people like me who exist on staff. But my take is that we often talk about, for example, the idea of species extinction and how that will negatively impact something else, which will then negatively impact something else. And of course, that does exist, that relationship. But what we like to talk about is, okay, well, can we flip that then? Can we help that species? So then that can help something else. So that can help something else. So in fact, you're actually making a multiple benefit wave, let's say, by focusing on this one thing that is within your capacity to change or to help. And typically that help needs to be done on a small scale. Like an average child in, let's say, 8th grade cannot possibly think that they're going to solve climate change. But they can certainly talk about, okay, can we arrange to turn off our air conditioners or whatever here in Dubai, of course. I'm guessing you're not using those right now, but you know, that type of conversation. So trying to get the conversation from these big, here, as you mentioned, all these colors and these big ideas, and trying to make them actually small enough that they become practical, like we were saying, so that a child can actually embrace it. And then in time, as they grow and they try that several times, they finally get into a university setting, let's say, where they can build that kind of technical capacity to then support their already existing kind of innovative thinking or multiple lenses approaches and things like that, that then they can actually create solutions that are scalable.
Right.
I'll be quiet now.
So you're definitely breaking it down into sort of tangible things and saying, you know, find out where you can make a difference. So you're connecting it to passion and purpose, and where the learner feels that they can actually, you know, I'd like to do something there, and at least they understand that their actions are how they're contextualized and they are actually doing something. Yeah. And
you know, in education, you're always trying to get to that sweet spot where a child is challenged enough that they'll grow, but successful enough that they won't lose motivation. You know, so it's got to be that sweet spot. Now, because we try to be a little bit more authentic in how we do our learning, you take a higher chance of risking failure. Which is, of course, a good thing in terms of how we now view failure, right? Historically. So we're viewing failure as a potential welcomed learning experience. And so we're almost like it's a stopgap measure in some ways in terms of ensuring that growth and education and positive growth mindset is taking place, regardless of whether the failure happens or not. But you're still trying to scaffold so that you can, you don't want to overwhelm a child either, right?
Well, what do you think, Nicole? Because what Laurence is talking about there is again, it's quite broad ranging. It seems like there's no way to tackle this without actually thinking about the transformative pedagogies, for example, you know, about experiential learning and challenge-based and problem-based and things like that actually put the learner in the driver's seat. You know, how can you otherwise develop a sense of agency? You know, but therein lies a challenge in education, isn't it? Because not everybody is ready to engage with that, with a change away from a traditional mindset of a deficit model of teaching. What do you think, Nicole? I mean, is that what would be your ideal way of, you know, if you've got limited resources in an education institution and there, you know, you see a limited maybe willingness to overhaul to that extent, you know, what are things that institutions can actually do to help overcome that kind of knowing doing gap in learners, to help them maybe actually feel like, okay, it's a big thing, it's a challenge, but I can do something about it. Are there shortcuts?
I think we're missing an opportunity, and we're making some as a world, and we're messaging this, right? Kids' entire lives, they've learned that the world is ending, that we're destroying the ecosystem, that nothing will be okay. We're giving these messages of gloom and doom, and then expecting kids to somehow think, well, now I can do it. And we're really missing an opportunity to change the message. The message is that we have this tremendous opportunity to use these constraints and these challenges and the way that we're looking at for innovation and change. We can look at sustainability and opportunity as fun and exciting as going to the moon was for my parents' generation. We can design this, we can do this. And that energy is really just it's about language and perspective. And if as educators, we choose to change the way we're having the conversation and engage students in their positive capacity to make this world a better place, then you don't have to have, all the fancy methods for education. You can just change the way we're having a conversation and I think inspire a different way of thinking about what we're looking at. I just feel that there is a positive opportunity in all aspects of education. And I also feel that vocabulary is important. I think that using vocabulary and the way that we use it in our classrooms. And so, for me, it's a lot about understanding sort of systems of vocabulary, mental models and root causes, and just having conversations with simple vocabulary takes you into a different place of having conversation about what's happening in the world. And if you can move that thinking, that's what we do, right? That's what we're doing as educators are supposed to be doing. And so you can stand in front of a classroom and have that kind of conversation without having to change the way you go about it. And so personally, I think that's our easy fix, is to just reframe this conversation in schools.
Would it be right in saying that, because I think this chimes with a reflection I have. I always remember the moment where I started to read about regeneration, and how it felt like something lifted and shifted for me, because it was almost like, before I used the phrase doom and gloom, it was like we were simply being reactive to a preordained fate. This is something, it's locked in, it's that kind of, well, all we can do now is mitigate the worst effects. Mm-hmm. That is hugely demotivating. But when you start to think about the potential for regeneration, not just of the biosphere, not just of the living world and our relationship with it, but about the way we live, about the way we do things, it's hugely empowering. And I always like the definition of sustainability being the ability of the current generations to meet their needs without compromising the needs of future generations, because therein you're not predefining what those needs are, and those needs they can shift. People don't need to eat the way they think they do, blinded perhaps by culture and tradition. They don't need to consume the way, we have a short memory. We think things have always been done this way, and we don't take the historical perspective of, a lot of things we've forgotten about how to interact with the living world that, some cultures have never forgotten, and we need to revisit that learning. So when you're talking about reframing the perspective, I wonder, something I'm quite interested in is how we actually go about helping learners or helping those in our environment reconnect with that sense of the world around us. It's something that perhaps in urban settings we've maybe been a little bit distanced from, and can you think of any ways or approaches that you've seen or maybe personally used that really help people actually close the gap mentally, really strengthen that empathy with the biosphere, with the world around us, and to use what you were saying earlier, Nicole, about not just the environment, but about, different cultures, about equity of access, about, thinking about people beyond our limited vision. How is it we actually start to go about that? Is it, as Laurence was suggesting, bringing in sort of global citizenship and things like that? Is it reaching out to other fields, or any ideas?
I think Laurence, you have the direct experience, but I think it's specifically is related to making this kind of education personal and being able to work in, for example, place-based learning or your immediate environment and understanding. I used to work in Mexican public schools, and I would cringe when the sort of printed notebook would come out, and here I am in the tropics, and they're teaching about climate change by talking about penguins and Arctic glaciers, and there's nothing real. Like, that is a fairy tale.
Yeah.
Right. And so you can see, and you have opportunities in every school, in every microcosm, in every environment to make this conversation real. Now, it isn't at the Arctic Circle. It's every day real. And so I think we just have to think a little bit about where it's touching us, and then be able to bring those conversations into our classrooms. But Laurence, you're the pro.
No, I'm going to agree with that completely. I did want to maybe touch a little bit on the trends for more and more of humanity to be living in cities, and the disconnect that provides between humans themselves and the natural surroundings that they're with. Of course, this has led to all these kind of forest schools or nature-based programs, things like that. But going back to what Nicole was also talking about was, again, I'm thinking more the natural environment specifically, but it doesn't have to be. Certainly your community space is an important space for you. But I would say if there's any way for kids to literally feel and experience nature in its true form, that is very transformative for a child who's never been in that environment. And so you were talking about access earlier. Certainly it would be easier for those children whose families are more able to provide funding for socioeconomic experiences. In our case, at our school, we have Week Without Walls kind of programs that take them out to jungles and things like that. And I don't know, I'm thinking the Bali Green School, they're in that space, but they're also very purposeful about how they use that space. But there are many schools that are in urban environments that have very little. And so plant a garden, bring in your pollinators in whatever way you can do that. And that also taps into the regenerative aspect that you were talking about earlier, right? So just because we're in an urban environment doesn't mean we can't do our bit to bring nature back. And in many ways, nature is a lot more resilient than we think it is. And really, it just needs to be given an opportunity, maybe some water, something along those lines, to really try to develop those relationships, I guess, between humanity and non-human natural life forms. So for me, that's very crucial, that ability to connect.
It's great to listen to you both. There's a common thread, and I've noticed that at every interaction, you're both acknowledging the complexity, but reaffirming at every opportunity, let's keep it simple, let's understand that not everybody has the same resources, and let's think about, even as Nicole said, if it's just a case of changing the conversation, changing the framing and the vocabulary, because these things have huge power. And as you say, Laurence, about a simple garden that could be, or some kind of biophilic element in the classroom that is accessible to everybody, so they can at least experience the connectedness or some kind of cycle or system, which is transformative, I think. So it's great that you're focusing on the accessibility always of this. It seems to be what you're really trying to get across.
Can I just jump in real quick? Something that also Nicole was talking about, which was the changing the conversation. So if you put Nicole and my statements kind of together, there are also those culture or maybe socioeconomic or I don't know what it is, but there's also how do you respond to that, right? So bugs, for example, right? We live in an environment here where bugs are considered dirty, inappropriate. We have to kill them immediately. So there is just that human response to them, which is they're better dead than around. And so the truth is that just because you're there doesn't mean that relationship will be restored by naturally necessarily, unless the teachers, the educators, the parents are willing to focus on the wonder of it, and instead of saying, oh, how disgusting this is, changing the conversation to come and take a look at this. This is actually pretty amazing. And so just being able to change your approach to nature, as small as nature might be in that particular moment, really shifts things. And kids in this urban environment where we live, they shift even in a few days in nature when we might go camping, for example. The child that goes camping is not the child that returns from camping. And I don't know if later, they go back into their kind of urban ways, but certainly something will have been left with them just through that experience.
Yeah, it seems like it's just about exactly as you say, it's something like that, just questioning a norm or something that's not even on anybody's radar. It's just a given. You treat bugs like this.
Yeah.
When you meet people where they are with just something, a challenge like that to a perception, that shift tends to lead to other shifts, doesn't it? It tends to open things up a little bit, and that can be hugely powerful. So I love this line of thinking, because I think educators who you know, that maybe externally imposed targets or conversation is changing around them in their institution, but for whatever reason are understanding that they really need to get more substantively behind, you know, these issues and bring them into the classroom. But it can be overwhelming, especially with initiative fatigue and the workload and the shifting winds of policy and all this kind of stuff that plagues teachers. So in your experience, I mean, what is the sort of best way to do it? I mean, if you're talking about a group of teachers within a school, for example, now maybe as so often happens, there's change comes from within, isn't it? It doesn't always happen from the school leadership team saying, we're now all about sustainability. It's going to be embedded throughout the curriculum. It can be a small group of teachers who have decided we want to do something about this. Without challenging, they know that worry that they always have about meeting the standards of the curriculum or whatever. How do you advise them to actually bring this into the classroom? You know, whether they're teaching maths or art or whatever. Is there sort of general advice or general approaches they can take?
I'll talk about the specific approaches. I'll let Laurence talk about the general ones. With no intention of this being a sales pitch, but it's specifically what we do, right? The whole idea is to give teachers some really simple tools that they can integrate into their lessons, that they don't have to change anything they're doing, and they don't have to talk about sustainability. And so the Compass tool set, which is a systems thinking tool set for sustainability, it's just tools. They're just very simple tools, and you can use them for math, or you can use them for history, and you can use them in English. And what most teachers will say is it just makes their teaching better. It's not really about sustainability anymore, although that context is there. It's building the skills and makes their teaching better, which makes it easy. And that's where we see people get really excited, because it's easy and they don't have to work too hard. So, you know, personally, that's one of the ways, but there's lots of great tools, right? There's lots of great tools and great ways. But it does come from within. It comes from the educator saying, you know, I can do this a little different. I can do a little better. What's out there for me? And choosing to take those extra steps.
Can you give us an example, do you think, Nicole? I mean, if for example, a teacher with a class or a subject that is not, you know, traditionally or very explicitly connected to these issues, you know, and say, well, how do I get this into my classroom? Say maths or art or something like that. I mean, can you give us an example of some of these tools that are of use to them or can be used? Sure.
Or Laurence, do you want to talk about specifically how you see it in the classroom?
Well, I'll give an example. I'm not going with Compass necessarily, but one of the goals for our middle school this year has been to try to get global citizenship. Again, we define it our way. You know, different people define it differently, perhaps. But the idea is basically getting the skills to get kids to recognize, understand, and hopefully act on something of global significance, let's say, but within, again, the context of the school. So we use the Sustainable Development Goals as kind of a low-hanging fruit, so to speak. They're nice, they're colorful, they seem relatively, you know, safe. People can pick and choose which one they'd like to focus on. But as you're saying, by nature, things will be connected, but you don't even need to talk about that when you're first introducing this, right? And so in this particular case that I'm talking about, we actually had two math teachers who were teaching a 6th grade math class, and they reached out to us and they said, look, you know, we'd like to see if we can like bring a few of these global goals into our classroom. And we'd like to talk about data, really. So we want the kids to be analyzing numbers. We want the kids to be creating data sets and analysis of data. And specifically, they were focusing on ratio. And so I said, well, okay, so give me how you want that to be. And the conversation was basically, well, we don't really know what goal to work with. We're just wondering how we can use math in a more, contextual manner to create that conversation about sustainability through the global goals. And so the conversation basically kind of went its own way, but ultimately we focused on water. So the issue of water specifically, and we made the connection with the local, well, I guess they're not local. It's an international NGO that also operates here called the Water Project, and they build wells and things like that. And so the connection really was between the teachers and the people at the Water Project to actually create a presentation that was then shared, of course, with the kids, similar to how we're doing it now. But the idea was, can you please share the data in usable format so that the kids can get the actual real life data about, I don't know, how many wells are needed in a certain group population size, for example, or how much money, is spent for different parts of these wells. How long does it take? Anything that's numerical in nature. And so basically that's what happened. So this person basically used math, but really in the context of water. And so the deliberation afterwards was using the compass. So the idea was, okay, the compass itself didn't use the math, but the kids were making the connections between the financial elements, the benefit to the community, how much water can be generated, all those kind of things. And then through their analysis and creating of ratios, they could then actually use the math in terms of their skill set to develop whatever the math curriculum was and to reach the standards that you talk about. So that's kind of the easy, low-hanging fruit, so to speak. Now, where we benefit is that they have a person like me to have that conversation with. Sometimes it would literally just have to be two math teachers talking about this and trying to come up with ideas. Which is why the benefit of this particular type of event is helpful too. If there are teachers out there listening to us, being able to get these ideas, and there's a lot of free potential support available through the internet these days, which is great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is when it's great when teachers start to work together, isn't it? When the maths teacher is able to say, kind of gone as far as I can with this, speak to the science teacher and say, but I noticed they were really buzzing when they were doing this. And, as a teacher, it's great when you hear, hey, there's something they're really into. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, it's a great building block. And then you think that you just got to think, how do I build on that in my session? And suddenly you've got a very organic development of that learning. And it sounds like, you call it low-hanging fruit, but at the same time, and if you think about it, it sounds like the learners are almost building a tolerance for the complexity of the SDGs by actually interrogating it on their own terms and actually interacting with it. And then suddenly it doesn't look so scary because you're able to take one block and kind of break it down and make it your own and learn from it. And then it's what's next. It sounds like there's, you've both been doing this for a while. And I wonder, Nicole, when you reflect back, what kind of moments what really stand out when you really felt like you saw something shift in somebody, or you saw a particular approach or project or something make an impact, whether it was something momentary or something extensive? What stands out to you where you just thought, I'm doing the right thing here. I'm doing something valid and worthwhile.
Yeah, the lucky part of that is there's lots of stories, lots and lots. I think one of the things one of the reasons I'm so drawn to doing this work in education at this level is this recognition of how powerful a driver education is for change and the opportunity that we have. And in particular, at every school, in particular in international education, where the kids who are attending these schools are often going to go off to be the sort of next business leaders and business owners. And that's just kind of how it works. And their parents are today. And one of the things that I saw happen, I was at the American School of Puerto Vallarta, and our kids, as part of their service projects, put on a sustainability fair. And every project sort of did something related to their concept of sustainability, which, again, was economy, well-being, however it looked. And they put on this beautiful fair. And a parent came to that fair. And in fact, that parent wasn't even a parent. It was a friend's parent, showed up at the fair, looked around at all these kids doing the work and said, oh no, I have to do something too. And he was the operations director for the largest tourism organization I believe in the country. And he basically, we had a couple conversations, and he went back to work and he completely eliminated all plastic use on all of their boats, on all of their work, and completely just replaced it. Done. It was something, $1 million, I don't know, it was $1 million or $3 million a year, just taken out of the use stream by the influence of the kids on the experience, and this recognition that he wasn't doing his part, and he had a responsibility. So I just think we have such a powerful opportunity to lead through our schools and our students, that we need to own that, right? We need to own that and encourage that student leadership to move us all along.
Wow, that is a powerful example. It really is, yeah. And I can just imagine how that must have felt for him, thinking you can no longer rationalize your own apathy or inaction when you see, the enthusiasm and engagement among these young learners, just thinking about their future, and caring and being compassionate about it. I mean, it just stands in stark contrast to inaction, doesn't it? How could you not act? That's incredible. Laurence, anything that stands out for you?
Well, for me, I guess it's just I just wanted to piggyback. I don't have a story specifically right now as I'm speaking, but I do find that over time, again, this is an experience at one specific school. What we're finding is that kids are moving from the idea of I'm here to be educated to the idea of I'm here to be educated, to then kind of push you to become better people. And so I love the fact that my office is kind of window and a door right out to the high school space. And so we have that door whip open every once in a while, and kids come in, and where they used to be talking about bake sales, which is quite typical in the service learning world, it's the bane of our existence in so many ways. Now they're coming in and saying, okay, look, has the school considered its climate impact and its carbon emissions? And how can we push the school to become carbon neutral, for example? And I'm sitting there going, okay, this is like a ninth grader now. So, and they're coming in of their own accord to ask me whether we can go in this direction. And I think, honestly, in many ways, schools have always played the part of kind of the neutral party, so to speak. So we're happy to throw the blame on industry. We're happy to throw the blame on everybody else, while we kind of feel that because we're teaching, we're a fundamentally good place. But for me, it's not fair for a kid. I know that we were talking about student empowerment, and I love student empowerment, but it's also not fair for a kid to be told that, the entire school sustainability program is based on this seventh grader who might carry the way, while the rest of us, it doesn't matter, and I'm waiting for you to lead me. So my point now is that even as a school, we have to be the example that we teach. We can't be teaching kids and then trying to point somewhere else for the example of what that good action is. And I think kids keeping us accountable is starting to work. I mean, we're getting to the point in education and in history, I guess, where the kids are starting to say, first of all, it's not so much the future as it is the present. And you guys better start, stepping up. We can't just talk about it anymore. We have to do something, which for me is amazing. It's great.
Yeah, I recently had a conversation with Ken Kay, and Ken Kay is one of the founders of 21st Century Skills, right? And he recently wrote a book called Redefining Student Success, in which a whole chapter is dedicated to a conversation about the way that sustainability actually is a missed opportunity in schools, that we can use it across the board to increase 21st century learning and our student outcomes that we need in the short term. But we have the facilities, for example, as a perfect example of 1,000 things that you can do on campus right now in your facilities as an example of improving sustainability and educational opportunity. And I thought that coming from him in particular was validating, I guess, in that, you know, this work is so critical and so now and so available to everybody if we choose to make it so. And like Laurence said, if we choose to be the example and put this priority out there and start working on it.
It sounds like also that the you're talking about the conversation with learners earlier, but it sounds like the conversation with educators and institutions has to mirror that in terms of its positivity, you know, in terms of its focus on the opportunities for, I mean, not just for things like innovation, but for the excitement of learning through solving problems. You know, it's great. You know, it's an amazing opportunity for learning, and especially when you start thinking about what can actually come from this. You're not just reacting to a problem, that you're thinking about creating the world actively that you want to see. Hugely empowering, not something I recall from my schooling, to be honest. So I wonder, you know, in the last sort of, say, you know, 5 years or so, I mean, are you noticing a shift in the way that institutions, could be individual educators, could be at the institutional level, are embracing this and are really getting on board in a meaningful way? And where do you think that shift's coming from? Is it coming from the learners? Is it coming from policy? Is it something collectively gnawing at the edges? Or what's been your experience?
Can I jump in here?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so I think I mentioned earlier, I've been in this field, let's call it, for about 10 years now. And I remember when I first started it 10 years ago, that I was looking for examples of other schools, other people who were doing similar things, so that I could try to figure out what a job description would even look like. And truthfully, it was very difficult to find schools that had anything related to sustainability or service learning for kind of the actionable piece. And if they did, it was very focused on CAS. Often in the IB program, they have something called CAS, which includes service. But sustainability was rare. And if it existed sort of as a stipended additional position to someone who already had a full-time job, you know, things like that. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, there's like hardly anything out there. So fast forward 10 years, I mean, schools are jumping on board, to be honest, with sustainability coordinator positions, with sustainability director positions. Now, they're not all full-time or anything like that, but typically they are timed or have a certain amount of time, which is usually, that's hard currency for teachers. So the worst thing you can tell a teacher is that you're going to be a full-time educator, but then I'm also going to give you this, and here's $500. So the teacher will basically say, look, I don't want your money. I just want some time, dedicated time that I can work on, you know, whatever it is I'm working on. So there's more and more of that now that you will find in schools. Even small schools will have maybe stipended positions, but at least they exist. And I think what's happening now is essentially there's been enough of a wave that all this little murmuring has started simmering, and now it's boiling to the point where administration no longer sees it as a, you know, as an add-on over there kind of an issue. Now I think they're starting to recognize, and in some cases embrace, the opportunity, just like Nicole was saying, of sustainability. I just want to give also a quick example. We have a 9th grade Global Issues in Action course, it's called. And we've decided that we're going to focus again on that tangible stuff, you know, kids can kind of put their finger on and do something about. So in our particular case, we're going to focus on sustainability, but within the school. And so the goal was that we would focus on 9 different areas of sustainability: composting, energy, air conditioning, transport, carbon emissions, whatever it was, and have the kids essentially get into groups and focus on what we called gaps. So where were the things that weren't quite working? So even though we say it's there, for example, recycling. So we have a recycling program. Does it work? depends on the person standing at the bin who's going to actually throw that in there. And so those are the little gaps that these kids could actually identify and focus on. And so next thing you knew, these kids were presenting to our sustainability committee, which is an administrative team at the school. And then now we have what's it called? I can't remember, a request for proposals for new solar panels that we're going to be putting up over our parking lots as a result, partly of this, but also of a school's direction to try to move forward and lessen our burden on the grid. But what I loved was that the facilities office has now reached out to those same kids who were in the solar groups and invited them in to be part of the conversations of who we're going to actually contract for these solar arrays, and have them be part of the conversation in the focus group. Okay, they're not making decisions, but they're one. They're one with the facilities, and we're talking about solar and we're talking about sustainability, and these kids are completely engaging, and not only engaging, but having the admin then come to them to say, we want your know-how. So it's actually really, really cool. These are not spaces we would have been here that we would have been in 10, 20 years ago. It's really, really amazing to look at that and to be, I guess, a fly on a wall in some ways of just seeing how that whole dynamic is panning out. It's quite beautiful.
Yeah, and I think it's an upwelling of the student movement that, of course, that's just been so transformational and spectacular, and then it's this pending gloom and doom of the reality that we're seeing in the world, and the two things coming together is putting pressure and good pressure on everyone to do their part, to do something. And so I think we're seeing movement. I don't think we're seeing enough, unfortunately, especially at the administrative level. I think there's still not a broad enough understanding of what sustainability is and the opportunity of sustainability at the administrative level. But we're seeing more, which is good. And the more the conversation's happening, at least, we know that we're moving.
You think that maybe that in part this is something to do with that sort of reductionist focus on the sort of carbon footprint idea, kind of reduce your energy consumption, fix your recycling and stuff like that, you tend to get institutions maybe interested in focusing on that because, also, of course, it makes sense in better use of resources, but not embracing it in a wider way. And what's, or not embracing it in terms of the learning opportunities, the engagement opportunities, and if you want to be raw about it, the PR opportunities and the networking, and there's just so much to benefit. Why is it not happening? I can't see a downside. I can't.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a conversation that's growing, and we just need to keep having it. I just think that it's very possible that people just aren't having the conversation enough, or they personally haven't been exposed or expanded in the way that, this kind of thinking expands your mind. And so the more examples we have, the more the conversation will come up, the more that we create opportunities for the conversation that are scaffolded. And I think that's important too. We talk about in classrooms that we're scaffolding this learning, but the conversation about sustainability also has to be scaffolded for adults, because many, many, many adults are still in the I'm for or against climate change. I'm for or against sustainability, that you can even be that way. Or it's about being green, and we have to bring that conversation, bring it back and have conversations about all the other things that sustainability is, or ditch the word sustainability and have conversations about things in the world that we care about, and then start to drive people towards that movement. And so I think that we sometimes jump to, the conclusion that our adults that are leading our institutions have a real knowledge of sustainability. And I don't think they do. And they don't necessarily have the opportunity for it either, because everybody lives in their circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, there is a tendency for people as they start to get involved in sustainability to recognize the systematic connections and I guess the enormity of it. And so I think the more you're in it, the more you realize that, first of all, it is a big opportunity. And second of all, it touches a lot more than you expected it would. And so for me, I think also that, educators are busy people. They've been trained in a specific discipline. They've been trained to also teach. And so they'll get into the classroom and then they will focus on that specific teaching. And they're told that you need to do this standard, you need to do this content, you need to do this curriculum. That becomes kind of the important reality for them. And then from there on, they become administrators often. And then now they've been told that, okay, now it's your job to keep everybody moving okay, to make sure, things are safe, all those kind of things. So I don't think we generally have administrators who are necessarily opposed to sustainability. They've just never really put themselves in the context of they have to do something about sustainability because they view their role as running a school and focusing on the curriculum. So I think it's just a limited view. Now you do have some who are embracing. I don't want to make it sound like no administrators are on board, but those ones who are on board are certainly the front runners, and we need to celebrate them like there's no tomorrow. And then from there on, really, even the administrators who think, okay, well, maybe it's time because everyone else is, creating a sustainability coordinator position, they might do it, but they still even don't know what that means necessarily until afterwards. It was the same with me, right? So I came down and then I'm knocking on doors and they're wondering why I'm there. Shouldn't you be on the beach, like cleaning the beach? And I'm like, well, I can also do that, but that's not, service level. We're not done there. I mean, there are a lot of connections here that it's just they haven't had the experience to recognize the potential, I think, really. And so we're all very much in that iterative, we're growing. Like if humanity in its approach to sustainability is somewhere in kind of an age bracket, I would put it at about the 8-year-old bracket. We're starting to get it, but we don't really know what it means. But we're recognizing it might be kind of cool, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, thank you both for the reminder of that, of just that kind of, it's really about empathy, isn't it? About remembering that we're all at different points on our journey and that we need to kind of think the best of people and like you say, not assume that people are out there armed with the knowledge of what sustainability is and willfully choosing to ignore it and not to engage with it, because that's that's generally not the case, is it? It's nice to have that reminder, actually, that we just got to meet people where they are, because it's as you say, Laurence. I mean, I think the more you get involved in sustainability, there's an awakening, and suddenly you're like, why is this not happening? And it's hard not to go down that rabbit hole. And I find myself going down that sometimes. And again, it's great to be brought back, because otherwise you lose sight of how to make the most impact. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? For people, just to round off and just ask you one final thing, for people that are out there, educators, people working in institutions, individuals who are simply interested in this, they might be in an institution where they can be the lone wolf. You know how that feels when you're that one person in the faculty that wants to do something different and you don't feel that culture around you. You might be so you need a network, you need a tribe, you need inspiration. Where can people go? I mean, and that includes your own resources here, your own organizations. They want to find out more. They want to pursue this line of thinking. They want to find out how to take the first steps, how to engage, on whatever level they are able to do this at. Do you have any recommendations for them?
Nicole, you want to jump in?
Sure. First off, there's loads of groups and networks out there, and you can do a quick search about what you're interested in your subject, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or somewhere, and you're going to find groups upon groups of people who are like-minded, who are trying to figure this out and thinking it through, Compass included. So Compass Education has a whole educator network, and you're welcome to join us. And we also have sort of a free course on our website, and you can just here's the basics. And if that's interesting, you can move into what's next. So I think that there really are just great networks. And Laurence, you might be really specific on some that you think people could or should join.
You want me to jump in?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So these aren't Compass ones necessarily, although I would recommend the Compass stuff too, because I think what I've loved about Compass is that they're very embracing of everyone. It's that happy we're all in this together group. And honestly, for me, especially for somebody who's a singleton, like what you're describing in a school, which is actually quite typical, it's important to have that group. So I wanted to just throw out a quick, I have a Facebook group that I started, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago when I was also myself and I didn't have any friends kind of thing. And so I threw it out there, and I've created a group called Sustainability and Service Learning at International Schools. It's a Facebook group. It is a closed group, so people have to kind of sign up. And typically it's for individuals, not for companies. So Mark, you could join as Mark, but you couldn't join as Neil, for example. The idea is that we're just kind of chatting on an informal basis to share resources, to ask questions, just create that kind of professional learning network. So I would love to have more friends, that can share in that story. But there are some programs out there as well. And there, for example, Eco Schools is a program that's international that people might say, what, can we try that for our school? That's a little bit more on the environmental side, not quite so broad as sustainability. There's the Green Schools Alliance, which is an organization based in the US, but they're international as well. And that's essentially free of charge, but the school's administration has to commit to moving in the right direction. Really, it's a pretty broad statement that they need to make. And then there are other organizations. There's one called Teach SDGs that focuses specifically on the SDGs. There's a Global Schools program, which is under the Sustainable Development something network with Sachs, what's his name, at Columbia University. I can't remember his first name. Anyway, there's a lot out there, and certainly a great starting point is Nicole and myself. The truth is, it's not that huge a population, so we're all over the world, but you do have names that come around over and over again. So in the end, it's just a very big happy family of people trying to do the right thing in whatever way they can, and certainly all are welcome by at any time.
Yeah, I want to echo that. I think I admire Laurence and his mentorship of so many educators in this work, and also offer myself in that way to people who really are trying to figure it out. We know people, we can, find people in your region who are doing it, who you can have a conversation with. There's a whole bunch of people who care a lot about this work. And if you're in one of those schools and you're just trying to find your way, we're happy to help you do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you both for sharing your experiences and your insights, and most importantly for offering a welcome to those who are maybe they need a sense of direction. They just need somebody to help them take the next step, or to find their tribe, to find a network out there. And I can, I'm sure everybody out there can see that this is an authentic offer. You're both clearly passionate and committed to what you're doing, which is amazing to see. So thank you for sharing that enthusiasm and that passion with our network. And just thank you for your time as well. And I'll be sure to share those resources. I'm amazed, Laurence, at how you managed to just list off those resources.
I've been working on it for years. I'm all about together we're better. It takes a village. All those kind of things. Yeah. I'm all about that. So yeah, absolutely.
Usually when people ask you, it's like you're like, oh God, I remember all vaguely these things, but you were just like, right, here's the list. So I'm very grateful for that. I've written them all down, so I will share those as well in the post. So I'll leave you to your respective evenings, a bit later over there for you, Laurence. Leave you to the Budapest evening, Nicole. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to speaking to you both again at some point, and just staying in touch and communicating. It's I'm involved in this work as well, but in higher education more, colleges, higher education, and quite soon in diving into K-12 sort of high school. So I may well call on you for some advice.
Happily, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having us, inviting us on, and pleasure to be here for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a good night.
Likewise. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you. Good night.
Take care.
Bye-bye.